I'm dying to know a bit more about you and just about like your process and how long you've been illustrating and all of these details.
Yeah, so I've been drawing my entire life. I went to school for illustration um, in Savannah, and then I graduated, and then immediately moved right up to New York. Started doing freelance, mostly with books, posters, vinyl, things like that. Um, I would sort of more put myself in the horror genre. Um, and then, once I started going, I tried to get my fingers in as many pies as possible. So anything from like movies or monsters or concept art and especially books. Um, that's just sort of been my livelihood. And yeah, I really love it.
Where are you currently based? Are you in upstate New York?
Yeah, so we moved up here about 2.5 years ago. Originally, I was living in Queens for about 14 years. So we moved upstate about just 90 minutes out of the city. So we're in the Hudson Valley.
Oh, wonderful.
And I really enjoy it up here just because, it's there's so much nature around us. Like we have this giant mountain view that's right in front of my studio, and we have all this wildlife around us too. And actually today, this morning, I saw a fox while walking the dog, and it's great.
It's
Yeah.
really amazing. I'm so madly in love. When I was living in the city, every weekend I would ride out into the Catskills on my motorcycle, and I just fell so in love with that landscape. And I think
Yeah.
there's pockets that you can get into where the nature is so feral, and it's so incredibly wild and untamed. It's really inspirational. So first of all, I think explaining a little bit about how I found your work was really, I think very organic, and it was. I remember stumbling on some of your illustrations. I hate to say it, but I actually think I stumbled on some of your illustrations through Pinterest, and
Hmm.
just was completely captivated with your line work and the feeling that comes across in your work, and was really excited to reach out to you and to see if there was the potential of doing any collaboration. I always say that fragrance is one of those mediums where it lacks it obviously lacks shape, form, substance, and it really does rely on imagery to be able to carry it across the finish line and to convey what the perfumer is trying to do. And I felt such resonance with your work. Your work for me, I think it feels like it's just outside of the realm of reality. And you were, saying how you've done a lot of work within the horror space and a lot of film and that type of work. Is this something that this atmosphere that you create in your work that I think is so definitive and distinctive to your work, is this something that has always been inherent, or is this something that you really developed?
I think, like as I was saying earlier, I was sort of like bookended into the horror industry initially when I started working, just because my style's a little bit darker, and I felt like I wasn't getting the amount of freedom that I wanted to just staying in that world. And so I really wanted to get creative with, adding different emotions into my artwork in a subtle way. And so I think I've always kept it in mind to, do pieces that are based in the real world, but at the same time, psychologically, there's just something different about it, something subtle. And I think when you have those two things coexisting in the same piece, uh, that little spot floating in the middle is really where the magic happens. And yeah, I think it's just sort of that tone is what I'm trying to capture every time.
I think too, one of the things that really resonates with me about your work is that it feels to me like some of the illustrator heroes that I, absolutely love, and you and I have kind of talked about this in reference of like Arthur Rackham and some of these juggernauts of the turn of the century. Who are some of the illustrators who really inspired you in your work?
I would say Rackham was definitely a big one. Um, I really love Sargent, Andrew Wyeth. Um, I liked a lot of the turn of the century, like especially Andrew Wyeth's stuff really stuck with me because he has a style that can be so still, um, but there's other things going on within it that tell a story. And another person who's not a painter, but Sally Mann's photography really spoke to me as well. And I think her use of like light and shadow in her black and white shots are just amazing. But what's kind of interesting is as I was graduating college, I felt like I didn't necessarily have a style nailed down, and I was freaking out because I was looking at all these amazing artists that I took inspiration from, and I was finding elements of their stuff in my work, and I wanted to be me. So I think it was like for a year or two, just after school, I didn't look at any artwork at all. I would only take reference from or inspiration from like photos, or if I would go hiking, take my own photos for reference there. And a lot of things just like I got really into writing, just doing short stories. I got really into reading and stuff like that. And I think those non-visual elements really helped me formulate, I guess, my own accent in the art world. And so I try and, every once in a while, try and take time to just really think on it and just, say what about me is going into the piece, and not just plain visual stuff, but what about me?
Well, I mean, I think it comes across really, really clearly. I think you have such a very definitive point of view, and it comes. I mean, it's razor sharp your aesthetic, and I think that that's why people love it, and it resonates on such a big level. Um, I find it so interesting because so many artists that I meet with, I think when they're first getting started, they're really trying to find their voice. And I think a lot of artists who I really gravitate towards now, it's so interesting to hear this process of when they got started, and trying to, I mean, for me, when I was in my beginning stages, I just remember having so many doors shut on me because people would say, "Oh, your aesthetic is way too dark," and they just really didn't understand it at all,
Yeah.
and they didn't feel that it had a place. And so it took such a long time of me really trying to whitewash what I was doing to make it fit into other people's and to try to get jobs and obviously pay the bills. And then all of a sudden one day I realized I was like, I'm so incredibly unhappy with the work I'm producing that it doesn't feel like it fits, what's living inside of me. And so, it was at that time when I made that kind of leap of faith to say like, okay, well, I have to do this the way I see it. And that adage of if you build it, hopefully they'll come. And, that was kind of the methodology behind it. So it's really interesting to hear that that was a similar kind of footprint or path that you went down.
I mean, it's almost identical to the path I was talking about because when I went to school for illustration, they said, if you're going to be doing um, freelance, you're going to be doing editorial, you're going to be doing newspapers and magazines, all this stuff. So I had initially started working with, New York Times.
Hmm.
Actually, my first gig was a full page spread for Playboy, which was
Oh,
pretty fun
wow.
because so I got to show my parents that first job. Yeah, but so I was working with all these places, and um, I would get turned down so often by these art directors because they're like, the story is about football or what's going on in the news and all, and we're about like teaching, and so I was sort of like lost because I was doing these jobs just to pay the bills, just to get by, and I ended up finding my stride. I think that's why I really like, you know, being in horrors because that's sort of where it gave me my start to start branching into all these other directions. And yeah, so it was just a matter of finding what was right for me rather than conforming to other people's wants and needs.
I think I want to ask you one more question about your aesthetic, and then I want to ask you about the work on Rhubarb Thief. Um, for me, I think there's obviously a lot of people working and illustrating within the horror space. But I think that your work in particular has a very different point of view, and it really does stand out. For me personally, I think the thing that I love about your work is that you seem to be able to have a great deal of restraint in what you're showing and what you're revealing and not revealing. And I think that like some of the best horror films is obviously it's not what you see, it's what's
Right.
implied. And I think your work really straddles that space in such a beautiful and elegant way. And obviously, I think you have several different approaches where some of it feels very charcoal in essence, and others feels very very detailed and line worked. And I mean, they create very different tensions and feelings. That aesthetic that you bring to it, is this something that as a kid that you had um, an interest in things that went bump in the night, or did you have like an innate interest in kind of the more eerie side of nature?
Yeah, I mean, Goosebumps was my favorite, books reading growing up, and scary stories to tell in the dark. I mean, I had a huge shelf of just all like that was my entire library at home as a kid, and a big part of what I learned through illustration, especially for book covers and book covers in the horror genre, is that you want to bring the viewer in, but you can't give everything away because it's that fine balance of leaving enough imagination for the reader to come up with things in their head by reading and not filling it too much with your own take on it. Uh, so I've learned a lot by doing book covers like that. And what's crazy is a couple of years ago I got hired to do covers for Are You Afraid of the Dark, which was
Oh,
my favorite show as a kid. And where that personal style also comes from, when I think back to uh, what really inspired me, I was thinking back to like, times as a kid. What did I love? I loved um, scary stories. I went to a lot of outdoor summer camps. And so, like the sleepaway camps, and my favorite part about that was, just being around the fire, telling stories. And at some of these camps, we didn't have tents. We were just in the woods alone in a sleeping bag. It was crazy. Um, so that was a huge part of my childhood, and I think I took away a lot from that in how I like to um, bring that childhood imagination to my adult work. Because when you're older, you're not going to be scared maybe as much as what is in the forest or of what possible ghosts there might be. I felt myself growing out of it, and I thought it was such a shame because it's such a wonderful thing to have that vivid imagination and to not know what's around every corner. And I really wanted to bring that back into pretty much like everything I do. So yeah.
oh, I love that. It's really great to hear that. It just kind of makes your work all the more tantalizing and juicy. It's really great to hear that. I'd love to hear your thoughts about, kind of working, with us and working in fragrance. And then I think it would be fun for people to understand, the process of, obviously I was obsessed with your work and asked you if you would potentially want to work on this project. And love to hear your thoughts about when you first heard about the project and about you read the story. Were like these images that you created for the book, did they pop out to you right away as like you saw these clearly? How did the story what did the story make you feel?
Well, I think initially when we were talking about the project, you had mentioned like a Rackham type style, and I had just previously done a series of just personal, just to put out in my shop because I had like a slow month. I did a series of Alice in Wonderland drawings, and
Oh,
so I tried to do my own take on them, but I also wanted to incorporate sort of the older style, like the Rackham era illustrations of when those Alice books first came out. And so I was sort of already in that headspace when you reached out to me. And I think going into that, I love drawing animals, first of all. I thought it could be, the mood of my artwork would be a good match for this story. And I especially love, when I went into this story, it sort of felt like a Mother Goose tale
mhm.
where you're mixing the devious morality of this main character, and there's like some sort of lesson to be learned here. And I used to love, just sort of fables as a kid too, and yeah, it just seemed like a perfect fit for that. But especially the fact that this was for a scent line, to be able to draw a smell is sort of like it's a little bit of a difficult task because you want to honor the fact that this book is based solely on the smell. And so I think what's amazing too is when this book, is paired with the scents, you're reading it, you're getting a visual interpretation, and then you're getting a smell that goes along with it. And so it's almost like reading in 3D. It's like
Yeah.
putting on 3D glasses for reading, and I thought that was amazing too. So yeah, I think that the project came together more smoothly than I maybe was expecting, and I'm really happy with it.
Oh, I am as well. And to be honest with you, I'm I'm so thrilled, obviously, at the success of it, but moreover, it what just thrills me every single day is to see people's response to it and to know that what we created is working in such a big on such a big level. And your analogy of like reading in 3D, it could not be more perfect and poignant for this project. No one has really done anything like this before with working with fragrance in this capacity. And I think we're both very much in our happy place where we're speaking about these kind of, fabled fairy tales. And I think, these worlds, especially going into the world of kind of Grimm's fairy tales where there's, a lesson to be learned. There's definitely a darker point of view. These are so evocative, in the storytelling and in the writing and in the illustrations that scent just feels like it's just almost second nature and that it already existed as part of it. So to kind of include that and to kind of take people into this world even further, I really think it hit on such a big level. But the other part that I love is how many people, when we posted about this, and they saw the illustrations, were very aware of your work, and they just loved the fact that like we were combined together and that the two worlds made a lot of sense. That's for me when I know that this really hit home was the partnerships and like work. And obviously my growing up with two parents who were both artists and then doing what I'm doing now, I have wanted very much to just really work in this very analog capacity and work with illustrators and artists to be able to create, these kind of wild worlds. So it's been really, really exciting to see, how people are enjoying this.
Yeah, people who I haven't even really met have have been so excited to that we were working together, and I was so surprised at the amount of feedback that came from it. And I was reading, some of the comments of people commenting on the set, and some are pretty moving. Like a lot of people, like you're totally right that where it like affected people in a big way. I think too when you're talking about adding scent to the book and adding this extra level to the depth of the project. It's a weird analogy, but I used to I go through phases where I listen to podcasts or watch movies in the background while I'm working. And I went through this phase where I used to listen to 1940s radio shows,
Oh yeah.
and so there would be I would listen to like a lot of Sherlock, a lot of ghost stories. But what's really great is you have the actors talking, and then you'll have all the sound effects in the background. Uh, so it'll be like, and then somebody will say, "Look, he's running, he's getting away." And so by having the scent, it's sort of like adding that extra noise to this stage play that you can't necessarily see. Uh, but in this case, you can. So yeah.
Yeah, it's you honestly, everything that you're bringing up is so true, and it really, I think it's just, scent is this kind of like funny piece of the puzzle that people really forget about, and you forget
Mhm.
like, how much it can like really take you so much deeper into the storytelling. So I'd love to find out for you, how much is like scent a piece of your world? Do you have any like favorite fragrances? Are you a fragrance guy? Is there any fragrances that really inspire you?
So I have I'm a really really big cook. I love cooking, and so for me, any fresh herb that I can get my hands on, I'll throw into a stew or a pot. And I love one of the probably favorite tools that I use in the kitchen the most often is probably like the slow cooker. Um, I have a pressure cooker too, but what I love about the slow cooker is that you have this 8 hours where it slowly fills the house with like this amazing dinner that you're going to have later. And that's why I use that over the pressure cooker because you don't get that slow buildup of smell. Yeah, and I'm not a huge scent guy, but from the samples that I've received from you, it's awesome because in my mind, I always thought, scents for men or cologne, they would just be so overpowering. And I know people that sort of hate that overpowering smell. But when I smelled your stuff initially, I was like, wow, this is like perfect for me. And it's not in your face because like I'm not an in your face guy,. I don't want to be. Uh, so yeah, I know I've been using it, and I would say that scent is a really big part of my life. There are moments when you were talking about like scent and memories. I think probably one of my earliest memories is my grandma's house. And whenever she would need me to stay busy, she would give me this like cigar box filled with cigars. No, I'm kidding. Crayons and colored pencils. And I just remember, drawing on the carpet, the smell of my grandma's house, and this box just filled with old, pencils and crayons, and um, whenever I get a whiff of something close to that, it brings me back to that moment for sure.
Oh, I love that. That's a really good scent memory. Yeah, there's something about the smell of crayons that always gets me. Crayons and like number two lead cedar pencils. Do you know what I mean? It's like it's
Yeah.
immediately it like ricochets me right back into being like five or six. It's such a wonderful memory. Um, with your music, so with your illustrations, and you said that sometimes when you're illustrating projects that you watch film or that you've got something on in the background, is there any? I'd love to know. Very interested to hear. Is there any musical genres that really inspire you and your work, or that you love to listen to while you're illustrating?
So, like your parents, my parents were both creatives. My mom was a creative director, and she went to school for painting as well. And my dad was a musician, and so music was a huge thing in my house. Uh, we would constantly like it was like every night growing up, it was a rule that we had to all sit at the dinner table when eating, and they would play classical music. I guess they wanted my brain to develop growing up, but um, yeah, and then it was all like Bob Dylan, Beatles,
Oh, incredible.
Rufus Wainwright. My dad was super into all of that stuff, and whenever we'd have family gatherings, my parents would come together, the whole family would come together, my dad would sing, and then, my cousins and aunts and uncles would sing too. I would usually dip because I was a shy kid, but yeah, music has always been big. It's probably, I mean, I don't really listen to, I think my music library capped at the end of senior year in high school. I feel like I've just not explored newer music, but I wouldn't say I have a particular genre because I do listen to music every once in a while. I like turning on that Lo-Fi Girl YouTube channel and just having that play in the background. But in terms of music that I'm really passionate about, I would say like post-hardcore or sort of experimental rock. Like I really love the Mars Volta,
Mm.
and I really love the Blood Brothers, and they have these amazing lyrics that are just so strange and weird, and a lot of times they don't mean anything. So when I was in school trying to come up with ideas, I would just sort of like listen to these lyrics and then just sort of see if I could think of something that would resemble that, like not necessarily uh, just like metaphorically. And a lot of times that would help me with my writer's block or artist block. And so I think that's the lyricism is a really important factor for me.
Oh, it's amazing. I love hearing that. It's really, really interesting. I have a very similar thing when I'm working in fragrance, and I a lot of times will get really, I tend to, I think like a lot of artists, I tend to go back to these very specific. I mean, in my brain I have about 10,000 different formulas that I've tinkered with over the years. And a lot of times when I'm embarking on a new project, I think like we all do, we'll go back to the bones of something that was discarded from the past and kind of see if it can form foundation. Unfortunately, sometimes it really takes you in a direction that's necessarily not on the right path, and I'll get really locked into like developing something. And there's an artist who I always I tend to listen to 9 times out of 10 when I'm blending, which is this late mid '80s band called the Cocteau Twins, and they're from Scotland. And the lead singer, she sings in gibberish basically, and she makes these kind of melodic gibberish melodies, and it really is. It's become the key for me that like unlocks moving into territory that is non-linear or like breaking rules in fragrance making, and it's really opened me up because again there are a lot of structural elements to building fragrance, and it can be prohibitive at times. You know what I mean? Especially if you want to do something that really is progressive. And so it's been nice to kind of lean into and to look to artists like that have really like taken the idea of lyrics and their meaning, and really understanding like the how do you emote or relate to something that does not have a word that's understandable. And it has really helped me a lot. So it's really interesting to hear you say that in relationship to your work as well.
Yeah, I'll have to look them up because that sounds right up my alley,
Oh
honestly.
yeah, you would. I think you'd really love them. They're extremely. I think that they're now referred to as shoegazer music,
Hmm.
and the genre is a really fascinating genre. Oh, and lastly, I wanted to ask you a little bit about the rabbit. I mean, I think a lot of, I mean, I feel so fortunate that you allowed us to use the beautiful charcoal illustration of the rabbit
Oh
as,
yeah, yeah,
but that existed well before this project. And
yeah.
I think it would be great to kind of spend a minute and to talk about that piece because that piece for me is so haunting and it's just filled with so much magic.
I had a solo show at Rock LaRue, and I was trying to come up with ideas because there was this painted dog piece that I did that I really liked the style of because I was just sort of experimenting, and so I wanted to do an entire series. I think I did a series of 8 animal portraits, and they were all because I'm from Northern Virginia originally. They were all native to Northern or the Virginia area. So I did like blue crab. wolf, fox, and then the rabbit. And yeah, so that was part of a set, but I think the rabbit was the first one that kicked it all off when I started that whole project. And yeah, that must have been, I don't know, maybe 13 years ago, something like that. So yeah, so it's a pretty old piece, but I really love it too, you know. And the guy that bought the original is he's this amazing guy. He runs his own winery,
Oh,
and the winery, and he's a big collector of art. So he's got this huge art collection. His winery is actually built on top of an unmarked burial ground,
oh,
and so the bodies and all the soil that come up through the grapes he uses to make the wine.
get
And
out! That's
yeah, yeah,
crazy.
it's called the yeah, Barron's Family Winery. They're in California. Very fascinating guy.
I'll have to look them up.
Um,
That's amazing. Well, this has really been incredible. It's been so much fun to talk to you about these illustrations and to talk to you about your inspiration personally. I can't tell you like what your involvement in this project. It changed the whole thing. So I don't think that I've got enough accolades to be able to just to shower on you and to thank you for bringing all of your incredible magic and your mystery and your beautiful hand to this project. So I really, really appreciate it. And thank you so much for taking the time to chat with me about a little bit more about the project.
Thank you so much for having me. This was a blast, and to formally meet you finally.